Hi, Benjamin.
Hello there.
Can you see us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you see us? Can you see our group of very keen young writers and creators?
Okay, just give me one moment. I'm just got it. We're being recorded. So can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you. Looking great.
Oh,
How are you?
I better dress up then. I should dress up. I should.
Yeah, you better smarten up. Where's your tie?
Oh, no tie. I got no collar. No collar.
Well, then you're excused. So thank you so much for joining us today. I can't tell you how delighted everybody is, and they've been waiting very, very keenly to hear you. We've been speaking to authors and creators and historians from literally all over the world. We spoke to somebody in Switzerland, then somebody in Ghana, and now you, the highlight of our day. And as we had discussed,
in Lincolnshire, in England,
thought that you and I would have a chat, and then we would throw everything open to Q&A. So I've got lots of questions, of course. So you're a poet, you're a novelist,
yes,
you're a songwriter. How do the three work together for you in terms of telling stories? What are the benefits of the different formats? How do you choose the format that you're going to tell the story in?
So sometimes I just have an idea of something I want to say. And then I think, especially if I just start writing it, as I start to write it, I then start to think about what is the best format for it. I normally start with poetry, but if the poetry brings forth a chorus, and then I think, well, this may work in a song or a music. I don't sing, I put poetry to music. There are some times when somebody gives me a piece of music and says, will you put some poetry to this music? And then there are other times when I want to tell a story that's more complex, and I think I have to say that in a novel. Because a lot of my poetry is me. It's me speaking what I think about the world. But if I want to bring in different points of view, then it's best to write a novel. If I don't want it all to be about me and I want other people, then it's best to have other characters. So I write a novel. Do we have some people online here from West Africa?
I think we do. We've got Ghana International School.
Okay, so they will know the work of griots. I always see myself as a kind of griot in the West. The griot is a kind of African storyteller, musician. It can be all of those things. It's not like in the West you need a category, a strict category. The griot goes from village to village. They usually come from a long line of family that do the same thing, but they are musicians, they are poets, they are playwrights. And most most griots in Africa will never be asked, what are you? Because they know they can be anything.
We've just been speaking to Sylvia Arthur, who runs a library and is doing a big interview history project in West Africa, traveling along the West African coast, interviewing women. And she talked a lot about the role of griot as well. When you write your stories, do you feel your poems, your stories, your songs, do you feel that you're telling stories that might not otherwise be heard? Thinking about something like Refugee Boy?
That probably, especially when I started, was my obsession. Growing up Black in Britain, when there were very few Black writers, very few Black poets, I think I knew all of them, and not many were published. So my obsession was telling, for the most part, my stories about my experiences that I knew would not normally be told in the media in Britain. And then, of course, other people connect with your story. And sometimes it's important for me not just to write my story, but to inspire other people to write their story.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about when you were a kid in school. How important were stories to you then? And could you have seen yourself now as this modern day griot?
Well, it's interesting because when I was really small, I loved words. I used to call it playing with words. It was a form of poetry. And I used to just make up rhymes. I used to go into the playground and ask a kid their name, and then I would make up a poem about them. I used to, you know, when I was about 8 years old, I wrote, "I love my mother and my mother loves me. We come so far from over the sea. We heard that the streets were paved with gold. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. I love my mother and my mother loves me. We try to live in harmony. Well, you can call her Valerie, but to me, she is my mommy." You know,
It's beautiful.
that poem, that's only a part of the poem, but I wrote that many years ago when I was about 8 years old. I just loved using words. That was the thing for me. Then later on, somebody called me a poet. Somebody said, "What you're doing is poetry." Now, this is really important. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I remember having a vision of what I want to do in the future. I was like, I want to take poetry and I want to put it into music, and I want to put it into theatre, and I want to put it into books, and I want to bring it on stage. And it's going to be funny, it's going to be serious, it's going to be political, it's going to be spiritual, it's going to have rhythm. You know, I won't need a book because I can just do it from my head. I remember having that vision. And to be honest, a lot of people around me said, "Don't talk stupid. Come on, you know, go to school, learn how to do maths and English and get a job and get married and live in a nice house and all that kind of stuff." And it was difficult. And I couldn't understand my mother, an immigrant coming to England. It's all about survival, you know. My mother used to love when I came to the breakfast table in the morning and perform poetry. But she said, "That's not real, you know, it's fun, but you can't think of doing that all your life." So I went through a period where I was thinking, well, maybe I can't do this. And then there was some time when I, in my late teens, when I just said, you know what? I want to follow my dream. I want to do poetry. I want to be a creative person. And that's what I did. I followed my dream.
Do you think literature, music, poetry, novels can be an agent of change? Do you see it as an opportunity to help change, make change in the world?
I think that this is self-evident. I think this can be proved by one fact. Look at a government that wants to come down and oppress a people and crush them. One of the first things they do is burn or ban the books. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Because they know that I may be in England and have an idea as a Black man living in England, and I may want to share that idea with the world and inspire people. And then a woman in Bangladesh reads it and gets inspired by it, you know, and then other people get inspired by it. And the people can rise up and realize how important it is to share ideas. Well, people who want to oppress you don't want to hear your idea. That's the last thing they want to hear. So I was lucky enough to be friends with Nelson Mandela. And he said to me, if anybody tells you that books and music and poetry and the arts can't change things, he said, send them to me. Because he knows how important the art was in getting rid of apartheid.
And Benjamin, back to you as a young person, I've heard you speak before about dyslexia. If a young person is struggling to express themselves in a recognized way, if they're dyslexic, if they find it hard to write in that way, is that how does one overcome that deterrent or that hurdle?
Well, the first thing is, and this is very important for anybody who's dyslexic, is to remember that dyslexia is not a measurement of your ideas. It doesn't have to stop your creativity. Some of the most creative, some of the most intellectual, some of the most scientific people in the world have been dyslexic. It doesn't stop them from having ideas. And so for me, when I started doing poetry, my poetry was really for performance. So when people asked me to write it down, I wasn't just writing words on a page. I was trying to capture the sound of the words. So some people said when mobile phones, because you know I'm very old, right? So I remember a time when there were no mobile phones. And when mobile phones started to be used, some people said that the way people text was very much the way like I wrote poetry. I wouldn't say this and that, I would say this, D-I-S, and I-N, that, D-A-T. Because that's the way we spoke. Now, anybody who speaks English, just in England, in Britain, let's just say about in Britain, knows that the way people speak English is different all over this island. And I think English is the most commonly spoken language in the world. And the way it's spoken around the world is very different. So who speaks this kind of so-called perfect English? Well, the king and some of his friends. Everybody else is speaking some kind of a dialect, you know? And so that's the sound that I want to capture, I was trying to capture in my poetry. So actually, standard English didn't bother me. I wasn't interested in it. It was only when I came to write novels and I had to write in different voices. But trust me, I mean, anybody who's listening to this and wants to be a writer, you must know that every good writer has a good editor, right? And the editor will help you if you want to standardize your English or things like that.
I'm interested that you said in novels you had to write in different voices. Is that to explore the different characters, to show different characters' backgrounds?
Yes, yeah, because everybody, just listening to them, even if whatever, you know, if it's whatever language it is, Hindi, Wolof, whatever it is, people that speak the same language will speak it differently. And sometimes a lot of the way they speak is about their characters. So some people who speak slowly. And I have a friend who's a lawyer, and she speaks really slowly. And she's always thinking about every word she says. And when she's in court, she's like that. She's very, very thoughtful, but she's very accurate with her words. Then you have people like me who are very passionate and very loud, and, you know, and it's something about our personalities, the way we are raised, the things we feel passionate about, that makes us speak those ways. And I'm trying to capture that. So when I'm writing a novel, it's not just about me, it's about all these other people who don't sound like me or who shouldn't sound like me.
I was talking to a friend once. She lives in Côte d'Ivoire, and she said the thing is that people are pretty much the same all over the world in terms of our wants and our needs and our shared humanity. And what makes us different is the way we culturally manifest things. And what makes us different is also the things that make us interesting. And that the best books are books that touch on our shared humanity, but show them in a very specific way. It's a long statement, but I'm interested in the books that you've written, which show people from very different backgrounds, different parts of the world, but anybody who reads those books will be able to relate to the characters in those books.
My first novel, Face, when I signed the contract to write it, somehow it got out into the news. It was my first novel. Everybody knew me as a poet. And some people in the press were kind of predicting what I would write, you know, and they were always predicting that it would be a black novel about hip hop or about reggae or about something like that, you know. And I thought, I really want to prove them wrong. So I wrote a novel about a 14-year-old boy who lives in the East End of London. And I do like to write about issues. I don't shy away from that. But I've written a lot about sexism. I've written a lot about racism. I've even written about discrimination of people with disabilities. And I thought, well, they're going to expect that. So what can I do? And I thought, it doesn't matter where you come from in the world. It doesn't matter what your culture is. Everybody has a face. And everybody has to live with that face. What happens if overnight your face changes because of an accident or a disease or something? And then suddenly you want to see your friends and they don't want to see you because you don't look as cool as you did last week. And that theme of what I call facial discrimination just resonated with people all over the world.
Yeah.
I got letters from women who in domestic violence, their husbands had thrown hot oil over them. In fact, one of the first letters I got, I'll never forget it, was from a woman in Bangladesh who said, I've been hidden in my home for the last 10 years, and now I'm going to get up. You give me the confidence to get out there. So the themes you write about, yeah, they have to connect with people all over the world, and especially, I mean, when they are translated. I mean, you don't write thinking about the translation, but when the translators write it in another language, it should make sense also. But one of the luxuries that we have in Britain is that if you live in London, something like 300 languages are spoken. You know, one of my books, Refugee Boy, starts in Ethiopia. And it's about the Ethiopian-Eritrean War. But when I wrote it about a theme that was common to many people. But I met many Ethiopians and Eritreans in London, although I had been there myself. And I spoke to them about their experiences. And so, to be honest, one of the best reviews I ever got, I think, in my humble opinion, was a review from a newspaper in Ethiopia that says, how did the son of a Jamaican living in England get our situation so right? You know? And I think it's because the theme touches people who have had some either civil war or some division. A lot of people from the ex-Yugoslavia connected with that book as well. Because they were Serbs and Muslims or Croats who were married to each other and suddenly had to split up. You know, so those themes are common. You get places where a Hindu and a Muslim is married and people disagree with it. You know, it's the whole Romeo and Juliet, but set in a war zone. Yeah.
Actually, that's wonderful. Romeo and Juliet. It is a theme that can repeat itself in numerous families, numerous cultures all over the world. Yes. It's something we can all relate to. And at the same time, we get insight through that book into a very particular situation, which sadly, of course, we still see happening over and over again. People have already got their hands up, Benjamin, so I'm going to stop and start asking some questions. Let's have you. Now, if you don't mind standing up, and so Benjamin can see you and hear you, that would be fantastic. Up you get, and ask Benjamin your question. Go on, I've spotted you. Can you see Benjamin? He's standing against the window.
I can see, but I can't hear.
No, he hasn't started yet. He's
Oh,
warming
okay.
up.
Okay.
Okay, let's have you.
Are you dyslexic?
Are you dyslexic?
Am I dyslexic?
The gentleman asked, yeah.
Yes, I'm very, very dyslexic. I'm severely dyslexic. This morning I signed my autograph, and for some reason, when I signed it backwards. And I thought, what am I doing? You know, I'm dyslexic, but I've never let it hold me back. I've always said that it's not a measurement of my intellectual capabilities, and so I've not tried to cure it. I'm told there's no cure for it. I just live with it. And actually, sometimes I'm writing a sentence and I get stuck on a word and I think, oh, let me go to the sentence the other way. And I find a much more beautiful sentence. So I never let it hold me back.
And Benjamin, do you write on a laptop? Do you write longhand? What's the best way for you to put your words down?
Actually, I do a bit of both.
Yeah.
It depends. Sometimes when it's poetry, I just make it up in my head. I don't even write it down until years later. If I'm traveling on a train or something, I'll just take out a pad and start writing. But sometimes I write with a computer too.
And what about recording? Do you think recording is helpful for people?
Sometimes, especially when I do my music. Sometimes the thing with music is sometimes you have a tune. So sometimes I'll be thinking, and then I'll just have to go, the bass is coming down, the bass is coming down. I just capture that, you know. That's all I need. And then I'll remember the rhythm and everything.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Okay. At the back there, why don't you? You've got to stand up. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see her, Benjamin? She's back there. Okay, let's have you.
I can see.
Okay. Normally, because me and Das are both dyslexic, and I normally, because in English we're writing a script, and I gave up a bunch of times, and I was stopped in my script for how stressing it was, and so I was like gonna ask, how do you not get stressed when you're writing?
Did you hear that, Benjamin?
I struggled to hear that. You were dyslexic and you were writing a script and you gave up? Is that what I heard?
And she said that she finds it stressful and has given up. And how do you have tips and how do you deal with that? Do you get stressed when you're writing?
Absolutely not. I mean, sometimes I get frustrated. I'm trying to remember a word, but like I said, sometimes I think, well, forget that word. Let me write a sentence and explain what I'm trying to say. Please don't give up. If you need to, there are some books you can read about dyslexic people who are successful and the things that they've done. I'm in a couple of those books. Where are you at the moment, actually? What country are you in?
We're all in Gibraltar.
Oh, in Gibraltar,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, you should be able to get some of these, I can't think of the titles now, but there are books where, where it's just chapters from different people who are dyslexic, and it's about how they overcame various problems or how they overcame some kind of discrimination or something like that. So please don't give up. I mean, we need you, desperately need you. Don't give up, otherwise I'm going to come there and I'm going to start talking to you. I'm going to get in a plane and come to Gibraltar and see you. Don't give up. That might
be an incentive to get you over here, Benjamin. She'll stop so you come and visit.
Just remember that it doesn't have to get in the way of your ideas. You can get it spell checked later. You can get it edited later. Just write it down. Remember, writing a book or a novel or a play or something, is not just about the writing, it's about the rewriting. Everybody writes again, everybody has a second go at it. Most writers do 3 or 4 drafts of a book.
Yeah.
So don't worry about trying to get it perfect the first time. Okay?
Thank you so much. Would you like to stand up and ask Benjamin your question?
Do you have any advice for growing push by any chance?
Do you have any advice
for what?
Poets, emerging poets?
Poets.
Yeah, she's writing fantastic poetry, Benjamin. So what can you
Right.
say to
Well,
encourage her?
There's been a few times when people have said to me they're inspired by my poetry. And then I listen to it or I read it and I think, oh, it sounds like me. And I think that's not good. They're copying me. What I like is when somebody says they're inspired by my poetry and I go and I listen to it and or I read it and I think it's nothing like me. That's great because they've been inspired, but that doesn't mean they have to copy and mimic me. My point is this: find your own voice. Read poetry, that's really important. All great poets read poetry, or at least listen to poetry. But I think you should do both. And then find your own voice. And most importantly, I mean, this is the same as following your, finding your own voice. Don't follow trends, you know. If something's fashionable, don't follow it because sometimes it will go out of fashion. And then you'll find yourself lost because you were a female Gibraltar poet or something like that, and the fashion now is French poetry or something like that. You know, do your own thing, find your own voice, and remember that poetry has many functions. Some people write poetry to put on a world stage. Some people write poetry to put in a book. Some people write poetry just for their own mental health. You know, none of it means you're a failure. If you do it and it works for you, that's a good thing. But the important thing is to try to be as true and as honest to yourself as possible. Even someone as young as you can write poetry, and in a few years' time, you'll develop and probably change your mind about what you said. That's fine, as long as that's how you felt when you were 15 or 16 or 17. But if you were just writing that to impress your friends, when you look back on it, you won't like it. Because maybe you've left that friend, or you fell out with that friend, or you just don't see that friend anymore. So please just try and stay true to you as you do what you do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That's wonderful. Those are wonderful words. Let's have you come on and stand up and
Have you ever inspired a famous person?
Have I ever inspired a famous person? I have, but it sounds like boasting when I talk about them, you know, but, you know, there are people who have made music and then they put me as a form of inspiration. There are people who have written other books who have said, you know, they read one of my books and it inspired them. I mentioned Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela read my poetry while he was in prison, and he said it was a big form of inspiration for him. But I'd like to tell you a little story, right? I was in Ireland once, and I was doing a talk I'd done a performance and I was doing a talk. And in Britain at the time, the government said that they were going to cut down on creative arts in school, just to concentrate on engineering and mathematics and things like this. They wanted to cut down on poetry and literature and all these kind of things. This was many years ago. So I did this talk in Ireland because I was against that. I said it was important to have arts and have poetry in schools to allow not just children to develop a love of reading, but also a love of writing and expressing themselves. Anyway, I thought nothing of it. I said I did it. Many years later, I was in South Africa, and a guy came to me and he said, "Oh, I saw you in that pub in Ireland. I remember what you said about the importance of literature and poetry in schools." And he said, "I use that in my work. I always think about it in my work." So I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I'm the Minister of Education."
Hey, well done.
You know, so he went back when Nelson Mandela came out. He was in exile. He went back with Nelson Mandela and he became the Minister of Education, and he remembered what I said. Now, he's maybe not famous around the world, but in South Africa, he made a difference.
He's got a huge impact on the lives of very, very many people. So if that started with your words in a pub in Ireland, Benjamin, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
You've talked about a lot of sexism against girls, but do you think there's a lot of sexism against boys?
Ah, that's a very interesting question. Very, very interesting question, and a very challenging question. You see, boys who grow up to be men, for the most part, in most parts of the world, will have power. It's a bit like in Britain saying that, you know, black people are racist. Well, I would say that black people in Britain don't have power. We can be prejudiced. You know, there's black people, even within the black community, some Jamaicans say, I don't like Trinidadians, or I don't like Nigerians, or stuff like that. But they have no power to dominate Nigerians, right? And I don't see anywhere in the world right now where women have the power to dominate and oppress men. But of course, sometimes people can discriminate against boys and men. But I don't see it as an issue where we need a men's liberation front or anything like that. To be honest with you, really honest with you, and I always try to be honest. Sarah will tell you this is my thing, right? A lot of the problems that men have, or boys have, boys to men, are self-inflicted problems. Problems about who they think a man should be, what they think they should live up to. You know, why they have to be strong, why they have to be macho, why can't they be vulnerable? Why can't men cry? Why can't men care? And a lot of those pressures are put on men by men. So, yeah, I think people can discriminate against boys and men, but I don't think there's a systematic system discriminating against boys and men. I think sometimes boys and men are our own enemy.
Thank you very much.
I hope you got that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. Okay, where are we going now? You, young lady.
This isn't really a question, but I think you're awesome, and I think we need more people like you. Sounds like you deserve to be recognized more.
I heard the first bit.
Thank
I
you.
heard the first bit, which kind of making me blush a bit. But what was the second?
She says that you're awesome, and we need to celebrate people like you. I think we all agree with that in this room.
Oh.
Okay, we've taken quite a lot of Benjamin's time, so we're going to have time for 2 more questions. Oh gosh. What's right? Yes, you. Oh, okay. Both of you then. You first. You have to say it a little bit louder and a bit clearer. It's far away.
Do you like writing?
Do I like what?
Do you like writing?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, just think about this, right? Many people in the world, probably most people in the world, get up every morning and they go to a job they don't like. They work with people they don't like on a form of transport they don't like. You know, writers are doing what they love. So if I had to do any other job, if I had to clean streets, if I had to be an engineer, if I had to be a, you know, a scientist or whatever, I would still be writing poetry. It's almost like I'm getting paid for my hobby. I love writing with a passion. I'll be honest again. Like I said, I like to be honest. One of the problems with writing, when you get well known, is that I appear on television so much, on radio so much, I'm doing interviews all the time. I get very little time for writing anymore. You know, I'm doing all this other stuff around writing. And that is a little bit frustrating. But really, when I get down to writing, I absolutely love it.
And what about teaching, Benjamin? Because you've been a professor, haven't you, in the last little while? How does that tie in with your love of writing?
Well, it's great on many levels. First of all, seeing students and being able to share my ideas with them, then reading their what they write and listening to what they write. But I'll tell you the best thing about teaching at my level, and this may be a bit vain, but please pardon me, is like when I see my ex-students and I see them on television, or I see a poster advertising them, and I think, yeah, that's my ex-student. Or I hear them doing something on television and I hear them do something and I think, I taught them that. I taught them that. And now they're famous and they're doing what they're doing, you know. That is a wonderful thing. It's not so much about teaching, it's about sharing knowledge and inspiring people. That's what I do at university.
Oh, perfect. Okay, what are we going to do? I think you promised to. I think I did. Okay, let's have it.
How did you know you wanted to be a poet, singer, and a writer?
Because I had so many things that I wanted to say about the world. I was living in England, and on television, there was a war in Vietnam when I was small. And I remember the war and thinking, why are people fighting? And then I remembered experiencing racism, me and my friends. And I thought, why are people discriminating me because of the color of my skin? I remember seeing my sisters. I'm a twin, I have a twin sister. I remember seeing me being able to do something and my sister not being able to do it. And we're twins. And I thought, why can't she do it? Just because she's a girl. And I don't want to get too serious, but too heavy. But I also saw domestic violence. You know, at one point in my life, my father was very violent towards my mother. And I just thought about all this stuff and just said, I want to say something about it. And I wasn't very good at standing in front of people and just speaking. But I found that when I did it in poetry, I could do it. So I really used poetry to give myself a voice. Somebody before you, I don't know her name, sorry, the person that said something like, I'm awesome and all that kind of thing. Trust me, I'm just a normal human being. I don't think I'm that special. I just found a way of expressing myself. And I want you to find a way of expressing yourself. It may not make you famous, but just find a way of speaking up. Because if you don't speak up for yourself, somebody will speak for you. And that's not always good.
Oh, wow. What an amazing note to end on, because we're all here trying to inspire our next generation of writers.
Thank you.
Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us. And we've taken you away from precious writing time because we're all waiting for the next book, the next poems to come out. Thank you very much, Benjamin. It's a pleasure to see you.
Take care. Goodbye, everybody. Bye.